Hi there, I'm Amita Singh. This week, I was responsible for Chapter 13 in the About Behaviorism book by B.F. Skinner. So, the chapter begins by synthesizing two very different points of view, the behavioralistic analyst point of view, as well as the mentalistic view. So, the idea that behavioralistic analysts depend on are, first off, a person is an organism, which means that they're part of a species and hold anatomical and physiological features which are constantly changing through the process of evolution to best support their needs within their environment. So, in order for an organism to develop and become a person, a set of behaviors must be developed as a result of their experiences and what they've learned through a variety of contingent reinforcements. So, these behaviors are developed and extended through a process of conditioning which can be directly connected back to genetic endowment. So that's our behavioralistic analyst point of view. On the other side is a mentalistic view. So just a refresher of the definition, mentalism focuses on the idea that there is a cognitive cause of behavior. The mentalistic perspective is that a person is a member of a human species that behaves as a response to their personality or their internal characteristics. Thus, this can explain specific habits, abilities, things that bring them anxiety, things that might elicit joy, their hopes, their dreams, etc. There is an extensive list on page 229 in the book on different mentalistic ideologies. So, moving to the next part of the chapter, there's a synthesis and things to consider when you are comparing the 2 points of view to ground you in establishing your own perspective as well. So the list, I'll first tell you the list and then I'll dive into each of them separately. So simplicity, use and control, use and prediction, use and interpretation, how far back does the information go, relation to other sciences, as well as is a choice necessary. So let's take a moment to then expand on each of those ideas separately. So simplicity. So simplicity focuses on the fact that one point of view is not necessarily simpler than the other. Due to the recast in terms of reinforcement and contingencies, it is said that behavioral analysts may be more complex due to the fact that there is unpredictable responses and results inherently making it more complex. So as we think about use and control expands on the idea that no one ever adjusts the specific mental activities. So someone's hopes, dreams, purposes, senses of shame, they can't be adjusted due to the fact there is no way to make any physical change to those specifics. Most of the time, they are only changed as a result of the environment. For example, turning on a light to remove the anxiety from not knowing what's in the dark. Despite the noviceness of behavioral analysts' ideas, it has been seen to be very successful. We must recognize the impact of the environment and listening specific responses. So moving into the third component, use and prediction. So Skinner talks about how a decision is more difficult if we want to predict behavior. We can't negate the importance of contingencies in regard to how someone may feel. So I was intrigued by this section as it talks about how someone may say that they're going to do what they feel like doing. Meanwhile, no one allude to feelings or why they may feel that way. Sometimes when we ask the why behind why they're doing X, Y, and Z, we might get a variety of responses, such as, I don't feel like working is a go-to for one of my students. Or you can continue to get more information when you ask the why. So, why don't you feel like working? I'm tired, it's boring, I'm hungry. And as teachers, we often take that and use it to provide information to plan accordingly for the specific behavior we're experiencing. However, with the use of prediction and examining the behaviors, we can use direct knowledge about the history of the feelings to better plan and adjust. For example, if this is always happening during a writing block, we can explore then why. Is it because it's right before lunch and they actually are hungry, or is writing hard for them and they're looking for a reason to explain their specific feelings of not wanting to work? The next piece goes into use in interpretation. Even when there is a little ability to predict, a behavioristic interpretation is more meaningful than a mentalistic one, according to Skinner, because we can better guess based on genetic endowment or environmental history rather than the feelings that have resulted in the behavior. The next piece goes into how far back. So we must be able to understand why someone felt a specific feeling before we can analyze their stated because of the behavior. We must first explore the past and the trends that existed. So thinking back to the example of writing, is this a daily trend? Has this always been the pattern for them when they started writing across grade levels? Has it occurred only this week? Do they maybe not get as much sleep? We can trace human behavior's past physical conditions, which shapes and maintains the behavior, but also look for the causes or the antecedents. So then moving on to relations of other sciences. So social sciences once heavily relied on the physiological ideas. Now behavioralistic formulation has begun to take over in simple terms. And lastly, the last component to really think about grounding yourself with is whether choice is necessary. So some still believe that mental life and behavior must be paired to explore psychology. However, where and how a stimulus creates a behavior is reason enough to focus solely on the behavioralistic ideas. So throughout the Skinner chapter, they really do think and ground themselves within the behavioralistic ideas. So then Skinner moves into another section, into physiology. So briefly, he starts by talking about how organisms aren't empty, and we must be thoughtful in establishing what is inside and what is being inferred. So what information do we have and what is actually happening? So when we think about the idea of someone having a broken heart when a loved one might betray them or there's an affair or whatever the situation is, we then are diagnosing inner feelings as readily as we invent new ideas or feelings. Physiology is now making greater connections to behavior as we more easily study them through the use of mechanical or electrical properties during neural stimuli. So it is becoming more tangible for us to actually have a hands-on exploration. However, there is a chance we may never truly learn the function behind many of the behaviors, as by observing them, they could also be altered. We also may never know what happens in the nervous system when a response occurs as a result of the Heisenberg principle. So the last section dives into the mind versus the nervous system. So Skinner discusses that by moving towards the idea that one feels or introspectively observes are conditions of one's own body, we are taking steps towards the appropriate ideology. It essentially is a step towards seeing what is only in reference to physical terms. When we think about the brain separately from the mind, then we can then focus back in on the facts that we are experiencing. So clues continue to lie within the contingencies of survival. Evolution continues to play a role in the whole process and what we see, experience, and the idea of self-knowledge as a means of observation. So that's kind of a synthesis of the chapter. When I thought through my discussion questions, I kind of was doing a lot of reflection on my own part. So my first proposed question is, which point of view did you start off this course aligning with, a mentalistic perspective or more behavioral analyst perspective? And how has this idea shifted through the course in regards to how to change behavior? And the second piece of this is, to what extent can behavior be predictable? How does the mentalistic perspective play a role in this? Have a great week.